Hey there, listeners. Go ahead and listen up real quick to this testimony from a former Iglesia Ni Cristo member, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Go ahead and listen.
They teach you that removal from the church is the same as being condemned to hell. It strips you of your salvation. So you live this double life, righteous in church, but worldly and proud outside. I grew up fearing their version of God, but I feared the church more.
That was the voice of a former member of the Iglesia Ni Cristo, or INC. And for its millions of followers, the INC is the one true church, a global beacon of faith founded in the Philippines in 1914. But for thousands of ex-members and critics, it's a world of intense psychological manipulation, alleged corruption, and a devastating abuse of power. This brings up a critical and often uncomfortable question. Where's the dividing line here? When does a structured, disciplined religion cross over into the territory of a high-control cult? It's an easy question to ask, but a notoriously difficult one to answer. The word cult is loaded, right? It often conjures images of brainwashed communes or tragic mass Kool-Aid drinking, if you know what I mean. But the reality is usually far more subtle. It's about power, influence, and control. And in this video today, I'm not going to rely on opinion. We're going to use a respected psychological framework, Dr. Stephen Hassan's B.I.T.E model, to analyze the shocking allegations against the Iglesia Ni Cristo. And this model gives us an objective checklist for authoritarian control. In it, we'll use it to break down how a group can gain control over its members, their behavior, their access to information, their very thoughts, and their deepest held emotions. So my goal is to give you the tools to spot the warning signs, not just in this group, but in any organization that demands your absolute loyalty. So point number one, we're going to look at the allure and the allegiance. Before we get into the darkness though, we have to understand the light. Why do millions of people, why do they join and devoutly follow the Iglesia Ni Cristo? So looking from the outside in, the appeal is obvious. The INC projects this powerful image of strength, discipline, and success. Its cathedrals, they really are architectural marvels that tower over city skylines. It runs its own university, a huge media network, and the Philippine Arena, one of the largest indoor arenas on the planet, a project with a reported price tag of around $213 million. It's US. It was founded by Felix Manalo, whose followers believe is God's last messenger. And the church grew from a humble start in Manila to a global force with congregations in over 100 countries. And for its members, the INC offers a powerful sense of belonging, right? It provides a structured community where life's biggest questions are answered with total certainty. The doctrine is clear. The Iglesia Ni Cristo is the one true church reestablished for the last days, and being a member is the only, I repeat, the only path to salvation. So for anyone looking for stability in this ever-increasing chaotic world, that promise is incredibly compelling. Members are taught to see each other as true brothers and sisters, which builds this deep sense of family. And this unity is what the church is famous for. And you see it most clearly during elections in the Philippines. Members are known to vote as a single block, which makes the church a political powerhouse that politicians really scramble to win over. So with this combination of community, certainty, and influence, it creates a powerful draw. It feels safe, it feels right, it feels like home. So the question becomes, if this church provides so much good for its followers, community, purpose, and salvation, why do so many former members describe their experience not as this great spiritual freedom, but as psychological imprisonment? And why are there so many persistent and disturbing allegations of corruption and abuse? These are great questions. Brings us to point number two, when the cracks start to appear, all right, when faith meets fear. So for decades, Iglesia Ni Cristo maintained an image of perfect, unshakable unity. But in July of 2015, that facade didn't just crack, it actually shattered. A video was uploaded to YouTube that sent shockwaves through the Philippines and the entire INC community. In it, Felix Nathaniel Angel Manalo, the brother of the church's current leader, Eduardo Manalo, appeared on screen with his mother, Tenny Manalo, the widow of the previous leader. They made a desperate plea. They claimed their lives were in danger and that several church ministers had been abducted. So Almost overnight, both Angel and Tenny Manalo, from the church's own founding family, they were expelled. The church's leadership said it was just a power struggle, an attempt to create division. But as more ministers were expelled, a flood of horrific allegations started to pour out. Former high-ranking members like Isaiah Sampson Jr., who was once the editor-in-chief of the church's official magazine, came forward, and many others. He claimed he and his family were illegally detained by the church's leadership council, just in an attempt to keep them quiet. Other ministers, they alleged a massive cover-up of financial corruption, pointing fingers at the church's top auditor. So there were claims of billions in bank loans taken out using the church's properties as collateral, and accusations that money from members' offerings were being used for these lavish lifestyles and other projects that really had nothing to do with the Iglesia Ni Cristo church. It's not surprising, right? But the stories got even darker, with some alleging abductions at gunpoint and campaigns of harassment and intimidation against anyone who dared to question the leadership. Even one minister was detained but later fled to Canada. He was granted refugee status after a Canadian immigration board found his fears were credible, citing the link between the INC and law enforcement in the Philippines and a general climate of impunity. So, ex-members that I'm in contact with through various channels report that the INC operates like a crime syndicate, like a cartel, to quiet dissenters within the Philippines. Of course, the INC, they've denied it all, and they deny it consistently. They dismiss the claims as lies from bitter ex-members and part of a plot to destroy the church. They maintain their operations are totally righteous and that they're the real victims here, which leaves us with two stories that simply can't both be true. On one hand, you have a disciplined church defending itself from a supposed rebellion. But on the other, you have a flood of detailed allegations of criminal activity from the very people who were once on the inside. So, how do we make sense of this? How do we get past the whole he said, she said, and figure out what the heck is really going on? Well, this is where that framework comes in that I talked about. At this point, we need a tool that isn't based on emotion or doctrine. We will address doctrine later, but on observable patterns of psychological control. We're going to use that B.I.T.E model, developed by Dr. Stephen Hassan, a mental health professional and a leading expert on cults. So this isn't a simple, is it a cult test? No. Instead, it identifies the specific mechanisms of authoritarian control. And B.I.T.E itself, the acronym stands for Behavior, Information, Thought, and Emotional Control. And by applying these four ideas to the practices of the Iglesia Ni Cristo, we can see just how much control it has over its members and where it falls on the spectrum between a healthy religion and a high control group. All right, so that spectrum. And point three, so we're going to look at behavior control. So the first piece of the B.I.T.E model, as we talked about, is behavior control. And this is the most visible and concrete pillar of authoritarian influence because it focuses on regulating a person's physical reality, what they do, where they go, and how they live their day-to-day life. So it's not just about a religion having rules or a moral code. All religions have that. It's about a system of rules so pervasive and so strictly enforced that it systematically sort of chips away at a person's individual autonomy and personal freedom. So let's break down these specific allegations and practices of the INC point by point. Number one, the control of your vote. Like we talked about, the most famous example of behavior control in the INC is its practice of block voting. So before every major election in the Philippines, the church leadership distributes a sample ballot telling its members exactly which candidates to vote for. And remember, its members are in the millions. So this isn't presented as a friendly suggestion. It's framed as sacred religious duty. The church teaches that absolute unity is a biblical doctrine, and this unity must extend to the ballot box. Voting for a candidate not on the list is considered an act of rebellion against the church administration, and by extension, God himself. So this sin it's so serious, it can lead to expulsion. So what this practice does is it effectively hijacks the individual democratic right of millions of citizens, transforming a religious congregation into a formidable political machine that can make or break careers, rightfully earning them the title of kingmakers. Number 2, the control of your time. And this control extends to a member's personal schedule. Attending worship services twice a week is strictly mandatory and is meticulously monitored. So for decades, members had their attendance tracked using a physical card, which has to be turned in at every service. Today, this is often done digitally with QR codes and scanners. And if you miss a service, it doesn't go unnoticed. You can expect a visit at your home from local church officers, demanding to know why you were absent. I mean, this is crazy. So with this, missing too many services results in warnings and can ultimately lead to expulsion, which, as members are taught from birth, means losing your only path to salvation. So what this does is it creates a powerful system where attendance is driven not just by faith, but by a profound fear of being caught, being disciplined, and ultimately condemned. Number 3, the control of your finances. So financial control is another critical element. The INC officially states that it does not practice mandatory tithing. You'll see that in my comments on my videos. They'll reject that. However, ex-members consistently describe an environment of immense psychological pressure to give frequent and substantial voluntary offerings. And they prime the children for this in their Sunday school. And sermons constantly tie a member's generosity directly to their spiritual worthiness and their chance at salvation. So this tactic deliberately blurs the line between a free will gift and a transactional payment for God's favor. So the pressure here is to give it's given relentlessly, and this issue became central during the 2015 crisis, with whistleblowers alleging that leaders were demanding ever-increasing amounts from members, even those in poverty, to fund these lavish projects and personal lifestyles completely disconnected from the church's spiritual mission. All right? So let's pause here for a moment. We've seen how the church allegedly exerts control over a member's political voice, their weekly schedule, and their financial resources. These are the external pillars of a person's life. But the control doesn't stop there. It pushes deeper into the most personal and intimate parts of your world, policing who you can love and even what you can eat. Number 4, the control of your relationships. In what is perhaps one of the most powerful isolation tactics, members of the INC are strictly forbidden from marrying or even dating non-members. This rule is justified by quoting scripture that warns against being yoked together with unbelievers, which in and of itself I agree with as a Christian. However, this is different. So the effect of this policy is profound. It socially quarantines members, ensuring their most intimate partners shares and reinforces the group's exclusive worldview. It prevents the kind of challenging questions and outside perspectives that might come from a loved one who doesn't quite share the same beliefs. So a personal testimony is that my wife's family was not allowed to come to our wedding even though we're Christians. But since we're not INC, their minister said no, which to me was absolutely wild. This is nuts. So they couldn't come to our wedding, they came to the reception instead. Furthermore, it dramatically raises the stakes for anyone considering leaving. If your spouse, your family, and your entire social circle are inside the church, walking away means risking social death and the loss of your entire support system. Okay? Number 5, the control of your daily life. So this type of behavior control manifests in a web of smaller, rigid rules that govern everyday life. Strict dress codes are enforced at services, with men and women required to sit in separate sections to maintain propriety. And there are explicit prohibitions against certain foods, most famously a Filipino blood stew based on a false biblical interpretation. So even a member's freedom of movement can be restricted. If a member wishes to move to a new city, they often need a transfer certificate from their local congregation, ensuring the church administration never loses track of them and that their attendance can be monitored at their new location. So when you look at these rules one by one, they might be dismissed as simple acts of religious discipline. But when you put them all together, control over your politics, control over your time, your money, your relationships, your food, your dress, and your location, you start to see a comprehensive system designed to severely limit their individual autonomy. That is the very definition of behavior control, okay? So looking at this web of rules, one question to me burns brighter than any other. Why would anyone agree to this? Why would you agree to this craziness? How do you convince millions of intelligent, modern people to surrender their right to vote, to choose their own partner, or to even decide how to spend their own time and money? Well, you can't achieve that level of commitment with rules alone. To get that, you have to control something far more fundamental than what a person does. You have to control what they know. And that brings us to the second and perhaps most insidious pillar of the B.I.T.E model: information control. Join us next week in part 2 as we uncover the methods used to build an information bubble around an entire community, where the church leadership holds the only key to interpreting the Bible, where critics are demonized as tools of Satan, and where asking the wrong question can get you cast out into the darkness. If you want to understand the mechanics of manipulation, be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss it. And share this video, please, with your friends and family who need to escape this religious system. And comment below if you've left the Iglesia Ni Cristo or are questioning it. I want to walk with you, or email me in private at apexapologetic@gmail.com. This is Apex Apologetic. We equip believers to engage culture with biblical clarity and to defend the faith once for all delivered to the saints. I'm Dr. Shaun Michael, and I'll see you in part 2. Out.